All right, so today I wanted to start by talking about the issue of all these politicians that have been caught recently in, these, Hawaii, Mexico, the Caribbean, these kind of places, not following their own lockdown, or they're not following their own rules. Now, I think there's, quite a bit of things to bring up here, so I think I'm gonna have to try and keep it relatively short because this is something you could talk for a long time about. But again, I think the biggest point here, I mean, I think there's multiple big points, but the first one being, um, who cares what side of the aisle they're on? Like seriously, who cares what side of the aisle they're on? It really makes no sense to just single out one side because you're admitting that it's a political thing then, like you're admitting that the virus is a political thing. Like again, like these people really make no sense. Like they really make no sense. So that's the first point I think, is that it makes no sense to make it a political thing. So um, now that we have that out of the way, I think the biggest point here being is that just forcing these people to resign isn't going to fix the problem. New people with the exact same um, ideologies are going to take their place, and we're just going to do the same thing over and over again, right? The only way to fix these problems is to look at it and be like, hey, these politicians, imposing these restrictions and then not following the rules themselves is an admission that the rules don't make any sense. Let's just get rid of them. That is such an obvious solution. I don't know why more people aren't pointing that out. And again, this is a CBC post here. And again, you read through these comments, and I'm not going to do it because it's painful, but there's some good ones, but the majority are just, mindless, complete idiot zombies, which is what you would expect from a CBC article nonetheless. But it's still, crazy to see the amount of just complete idiots out there these days because again, these politicians not following the rules themselves is an admission that the rules don't make any sense and that the rules are only put in place because power hungry people want power. It's not about a virus. Again, if the virus was actually a concern, these people would be following their own rules. You actually think during the Black Plague, I guess they didn't really know what germ theory was, but if they would have known, do you actually think that people, these politicians, would have just been traveling around willy nilly? Like, no, of course not. So again, like, it just this is the big problem when it comes to this whole situation, is that we have people that are so tribal that all they're worried about is, oh, the other guy, or this side or the other side. Well, no, the side is, power versus, freedom, or totalitarianism versus freedom. It has nothing to do with conservative versus liberal versus NDP or whatever. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the politicians not following the rules themselves is an admission that they don't actually believe that the rules make any sense. I don't understand why we have to complicate it any more than that, because it is really just that simple. It is that simple, that the politicians not following the rules themselves, and it is an admission that the rules make no sense. Like again, I don't understand why that can't make more sense to people, because again, it is incredibly obvious. It is incredibly obvious that that is the case. Again, forcing people to resign isn't going to fix the problem. It doesn't fix the problem that the rules didn't make any sense in the first place, right? It doesn't make any sense. So again, this is something that again, it can be easily summed up. Like I said, there's a lot of aspects you could get into, but I think it can be easily summed up into thinking, or into saying that we should just get rid of the restrictions. Like it makes no sense. The only restrictions that make sense still are maybe ones on nursing homes and maybe on large gatherings. Aside from that, no restrictions make sense whatsoever. No mask mandates, no closing businesses, no, none of that stuff, right? No limits on family gatherings or any of that garbage. Again, it makes no sense. The only, and for the simple reason being that there's no correlation between imposing said restrictions and a reduction in cases. There's no correlation. Again, simply bringing up a couple examples isn't proof. You have to bring up a lot of examples to prove that, right? A lot of examples. And there should be next to no examples of the opposite happening, which there is plenty of those. So again, there's no reason to have all these restrictions And by the politicians not following the rules themselves, they are admitting that they don't even believe it themselves. It is just that simple. And this is from Luke Radowski. And again, this is another very good point that I think should be talked about a lot more. And it's of a picture of Times Square, where there's usually a large gathering for New Year's, which there wasn't, um, and a picture of Wuhan, where there is a large gathering for New Year's. And again, the whole point being is that how does this make any sense whatsoever? How does this make any sense whatsoever? And the reality of it, the reality behind this whole situation is that China has figured out that lockdowns don't do anything. They may have known it all, the entire time, or they just did their crazy lockdown and knowing it didn't do anything, and then they ended it, right? They ended it. And again, for all the people saying, "Oh, we need a circuit breaker lockdown," again, that's not possible. It's not possible unless you're willing to become an authoritarian country. Like, unless you're willing to become an authoritarian country, again, these are the same people that are so worried about fascism, apparently, but yet they want fascism to fix a problem that largely doesn't exist. I'm not saying it doesn't exist at all, but largely it doesn't. So again, this is just the irony of these people that are all worried about fascism, but yet their solution to an incredibly small problem in society is fascism, right? It's very funny. Um, but anyway, like I say, the main point here being is that this doesn't make any sense. Like, this doesn't make any sense. That why are we still doing the same thing over and over again? Like, again, it is the unofficial definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? It's the unofficial definition that doing the same thing over and over again is insane, and yet that is what we are doing. We are on, second, third, fourth lockdowns in many of these Western areas. Meanwhile, the rest of the world isn't doing, at least, in large part, isn't doing this stuff. This is another thing that really kind of shocks me, the amount of people that think that the whole world is in lockdown right now, which largely isn't true. It's really just, basically the Western, North America and Europe. Those are the only real areas that have, at least to a large degree, lockdowns, right? The rest of the world either doesn't care or has figured out that it isn't a big deal, right? Um, and this is the other thing too, that if this virus was so bad, then why aren't people dropping like flies in the areas that the areas that don't have lockdowns, right? Again, it makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. And I think another big thing of this here being too is that this is how really bad people get away with doing really bad stuff. This is how really bad people get away with doing bad stuff, and it's a point I brought up before, in that the average person believes that a lot of these politicians, they would never do this bad stuff because if it was them who did it, oh, they would have this guilty conscience and they wouldn't be able to do it. But that's not that's not how bad people work. I think one of the main reasons how bad people get away with doing bad stuff is they don't flat out admit or point out to people that they're doing the bad stuff. They do it kind of in ways like this, in that they impose these, tyrannical lockdowns, but on the flip side, they allow you to be exposed to all the evidence in the world that the lockdowns don't work, right? This is how bad people get away with doing bad stuff. And again, I think this is a perfect example of it. So again, the next thing we need to talk about is the schools. Again, people are all paranoid about the schools, which makes no sense. But anyway, um, from Anthony Fury here saying this sort of reasoning is a tragic triumph of ignorance that we are witnessing all around us. You do not stunt the growth of all children because a small number of them have developed a mild version at home that they are unlikely to pass on in school or and broader society. And again, the data is very clear on this, that the flu is more deadly for school age kids, and not only that, it's actually significantly more deadly. I think it's like 3 or 4 times more deadly. Um, and the idea of asymptomatic spread has already been shown to be at best incredibly rare, and on the flip side may not even be possible, right? Like, it is at worst incredibly rare asymptomatic spread. So again, the reason why that they want kids to not be in school is because, oh, they're gonna catch it at school and they're gonna be asymptomatic and they're gonna spread it to their parents and their grandparents. Well, no, the idea of that has already largely been debunked, right? So the reality behind these school closures is just to drive more fear. It's just to drive more fear, right? Again, it's very clear, it's very obvious. And the last thing I wanted to bring up, again, this happened like a couple weeks ago, but I wanted to talk about this, UCP meeting where I think it was Jason Kenney, that's what Madhu and one or two other people here, got caught in a meeting not wearing a mask. And again, the first point of this being is that number one, they are social distance, right? They're clearly social distance. So again, like, does social distancing not mean anything to these people? Like, does social distancing not mean anything anymore? I don't know. Like, I don't know. Because again, if you think that masks should be mandatory, then you're admitting that social distancing doesn't work, right? So again, it really doesn't make any sense. Now again, the concept of social distancing, I believe, at least to some extent, is pseudoscience. I mean, if you're 100 feet away from someone, you should be good, but the idea of 6 feet being this magic number doesn't really make any sense. Um, so again, I think social distancing is to a large degree pseudoscience, but the whole point being here is that who cares if they're not wearing a mask? Like, this is the thing when it comes to these politicians. Like, I'm guessing Jason Kenney gets tested like every day, if not very close to it. So again, why does it matter if he's not wearing a mask, right? Like, why does it matter? Like, all of these people probably get tested pretty well every day. I don't understand why it's such a big deal. Like, it really makes no sense. And again, they're supposed to be, at least they're probably not actually following the rules, but that's beside the point. They're not supposed to be visiting, random people all the time, right? So the idea that they need to be wearing a mask, it really makes no sense, especially if they're social distancing and being tested on a regular basis. Like, who cares? So anyway, that's what last thing I wanted to bring up, just to kind of make a point of that. But anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. But again, at the very least, just check out those links and stay tuned for more. And have a good day.